What's up, guys? Thanks for tuning in for today's video. You are just in time. Everybody knows in fantasy football that what you did last year does not mean that that's going to help you this year. Today, I want to talk about 5 players who won't repeat. Cue that intro. Stop fronting and hit that button. Let's go. All right, so today I want to talk about one player in each of the top 4 positions. So we're talking quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. I want to talk about one player who isn't going to finish in the top 5 who did last year. Let's look into it. So at quarterbacks, you got Patrick Mahomes, you got Josh Allen, you got Jalen Hurts, you got Joe Burrow, and you got Geno Smith running out the top 5. Now, out of those players, who do you think is not going to finish in the top 5? I'll give you one hint. I'm going to go with Geno Smith. He did have a good year last year. He had almost 70% completion percentage. He had over 4,000 yards. He had 30 touchdowns. He had what most people are going to call a breakout year. He had a really good year, but I don't think that his top 5 finish is going to roll over till this year. Let's look at the reasons as to why, right? You had Justin Herbert, who many presume is a top 5 quarterback. He had a down year. You had Lamar Jackson getting injured. You had Justin Fields, who on the second half of the season was a top 5 quarterback. If you project Justin Fields' top 5, last 5 games, if you project that to his first half of the season, he would have been a top 5 quarterback. You also got Kyler Murray, who didn't really get a lot of playing time. He got hurt. So I feel like any one of those top guys could slide into that top 5. No disrespect to Geno Smith, but I don't think he's gonna, equivalent to that top 5 finish like last year, right? Let's look at the running backs. You got Austin Eckler, who finished number 1. You got CMC, who finished number 2. You got Josh Jacobs, who finished at 3. You got King Henry at 4. And then you got Saquon at 5. Out of those top 5 players, I do think that pretty much all 5 of those could repeat. But if I had to pick one, I think I'm going to go with Derrick Henry. So you got Derrick Henry, who, once again, for fourth, fifth year in a row, over 300 touches. Over time, that breaks down your knees. He did have that foot injury last year, but I do think that, Derrick Henry is a guy who's just a monster athlete. I don't think that the overall touches is going to start to wear him down over season. Eventually, Father Time is going to kick in. The Titans are also in the rebuild. You got rid of A.J. Brown. You brought in Traylon Burks, who had a decent rookie year, but he's not that alpha guy. You really don't have a lot of guys. You had Bobby Trees, who at least had some leadership in the building. You got rid of him. You got Derrick Henry, who's one of the last Mohicans, you could say, on that team. So he is the leader of the clubhouse, but at the same time, over time, those touches, those manufactured touches, is going to hurt. It's going to start to break down. I mean, even last year, you look at it, he had 350 attempts. He had 1,500 yards. You had over 10 touchdowns. You even got into the receiving game a little bit. You had 30 catches. You had, almost 400 yards receiving. He was the RB4. But once again, out of those top 5 players, I do think that King Henry is one of the guys who's going to fall out that top 5. Let's look at the tight ends. You got Travis Kelce, who he's not going anywhere. You got T.J. Hockenson. You got George Kittle. You got Mark Andrews, who had a down year. We did think that he could have, had Travis Kelce at the number 1 slot once again for a second year in a row. And you got Evan Engram. One of these guys are not like the same. You guessed it. It's Evan frickin' Engram, who many players didn't even know he was on the team last year. He played for the Giants, and they just wasted his career. So let's go ahead and trade him to Jacksonville. Let's watch him die. He actually had a good year last year. Last year he had almost 100 targets, almost 80 catches, almost 800 yards, handful of touchdowns. He was a tight end 5. But let's look at this. He was a tight end 5 by 20 points. So if you do the math, 20 points compared to the tight end 6, he only had a 20-point lead, right? So we're talking a point and a half per game. That's not really that much wiggle room. And then you also look at it, the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to have a lot of mouths to feed next year. You got Trevor Lawrence, who's got to get it to not only Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, but they also added Calvin Ridley. So, there's just not that many targets to go around. Even with 100 targets last year, he only got 80 catches and not even 800 yards for a touchdown. So, once again, it did get him in that top 5 range, but only about 20 points. You had guys like Zach Ertz who got hurt. You got Darren Waller who had a bad year because of injury. So I do think that some of those guys are going to leap into that top five range. At the wide receivers, you got Jetta, you got Tyreek Hill, you got Devonta Adams, you got Stephon Diggs, and you got Ceede Lamb. Once again with the running backs, I do think that there's a lot of those guys can easily repeat into that top five. But once again, if I had to pick one, I'm gonna go with Ceede Lamb. He had over 150 targets last year, over 100 receptions, almost 1,400 yards, 9 touchdowns. He was the wide receiver 5. I do think that Dallas, they need a lot of, help at the wide receiver, and they do need some depth. Michael Gallup didn't do what they thought he was going to do. He did, have to come back from injury, but he's going to be a little bit better this year. But I don't think that they just want to go into the year as CeeDee Lamb being the only alpha on the team. They need some help. McCarthy also wants to run the ball. They got rid of Zeke. You got Tony Pollard, but they also want to run the ball. They're going to bring someone in. They're going to have a little ground and pound, focus on the defense. You sign Stephon Gilmore. Now, you also sign Brandon Cooks, which you can say definitely adds help to it. It definitely opens up the box a little bit for CeeDee Lamb. But at the same time, once again, if I had to choose one of these top 5 guys, I'm going to go with CeeDee. I don't think that Jetta has any trouble breaking that top 5 again. Tyreek Hill easily, just based off of percentage of targets of that team. It's Tyreek Hill and it's Jalen Waddle and it's no one else. You got Devonta Adams, who you're not going to count out no matter what. Stephon Diggs, as long as he's tied to Josh Allen, he's going to be a top 5 wide receiver. So I got to go with CeeDee Lamb. Guys like Jamar Chase got hurt last year. Guys like Cooper Kupp. Those are going to be the guys that's probably going to run out the top 5. Once again, if I had to pick, CeeDee Lamb is one of those guys that I'm going to, kick out that top 5. So listen real close. I need you to subscribe. I need you to comment below. Tell me which one of these players you think is going to break into the top 5 and which one of these players you're going to fall out the top 5. Thanks for following along. Stay tuned for the next video. Boom.